Hi, it's Ileana, and today I am going to be discussing the 1954 Greada Treaty signed by President Eisenhower and how this form of a treaty was made with aliens at the Holloman AFB base. But I'm going to discuss the preface, what happened before this treaty was supposedly signed. So there had been crashes in 1947, which was called the Roswell crash, where two saucer-shaped crafts had crashed, one on a farm and one in the hills. And those crashes had aliens on board, what looked like grays with a mixture of reptilian. So they were hybrids. And also in 1948, there was the Laredo incident crash of another saucer, and supposedly bodies recovered from that. So I think that before the Greada Treaty, the preface was the 1947 Roswell incident and later 1948, the Laredo incident. So these crashes were created potentially on purpose for this technology, for anti-gravity technology, to be started to be introduced through the ETs. And some of the crafts themselves could have been shot down by directed energy beam weapons that we already had in use by the 1947s. So it could be either or, just to preface, because through my research I found that some of these crashes were done on purpose to get the notice of the US government that the Greys had this technology, and through crash retrievals this technology could be studied and eventually reverse engineered so it would make sense to stage these crashes and for the aliens, for the Greys, to form treaties with the US government so they could get access to genetic material from humans. On the 1954 Greada Treaty, the Eisenhower administration bypasses the US Constitution and forms a pact with alien races. In exchange for advanced technology, the aliens would be allowed to do experiments on livestock, minerals, and a small group of humans. Well, they did experiments on a lot of humans that were abducted, not just a small group. Eisenhower really didn't know what he was signing in that treaty. With elements that would inspire the X-Files TV series, the likely event has to play with the imaginations of thousands of people before the Greada Treaty. Around 1953, some astronomers spotted a body of matter from outer space in a collision course to Earth. Further analysis of those objects could not be asteroids or another natural stellar body. A group of scientists hopes to contact and communicate with the possible alien visitors. Now, this sounds very similar to a new TV series called Debris, where parts of an alien craft breaks up and crashes through the Earth's atmosphere. And each particular piece of the crashed debris has certain abilities to communicate with human beings and interact telepathically with humans. The debris has the ability to clone humans. The debris has the ability to shift time matter and even do time travel aspects. And the debris has the ability to heal human beings and to create, literally to create a new world, to reshape the world, to reshape a planet's atmosphere, to change the environment. And this debris is being collected by the CIA and MI6. And also perhaps aspects of other government bodies like the FBI, the DOD, the NSA. They weren't mentioned in the series, but in reality, on these crash retrievals of what happened in 1947, Roswell incident, Laredo incident, and further down in the 1950s to the current day of 2021, anytime crash retrievals are done, I wouldn't be surprised if the CIA, FBI, MI6, DOD, DARPA, they're involved as part of the retrievals of these crashes, whatever the saucers, the crafts, technology, whatever crashes, they quickly retrieve it and it's covered up like nothing ever happened. So the show Debris really covers that aspect of how crash retrievals happen and how it's covered up by the three-letter agencies. So that's a real preface, kind of sounding preface to what's being described here. The team succeeded in establishing a conversation by radio communication and using the computer binary language. Now, in the show Debris, there's no actual aliens or extraterrestrials, just the crashed remains of their ship, their technology. But here, before what happened in the Greada Treaty, supposedly there was a craft with aliens on board. This did not appear to be a rescue mission from the 1947 Roswell UFO incident because of the number and size of the spaceships. At first, President Eisenhower rejected a face-to-face meeting with the aliens. The aliens arranged some exhibitions on Washington, D.C., and on board of a United States Navy ship of their power to the president. The aliens told through messages that they came in peace. This is supposedly what happened. It's hard to know the real facts because there's not a lot of information on the Greada Treaty and what Eisenhower really did. President Eisenhower meets the alien visitors. U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower landed at Holloman AFB on board of a Lockheed Constellation. Just about 20 people on board, including Secret Servicemen with a small crew, so there was 20 people on board. The presidential airplane, or the president's airplane, taxied and stopped at about half a mile away from the base tower. So it's like Air Force One, the presidential airplane. The civilians and military on the base had been told that while the president was here, this would be a business as usual day. But of course it wasn't, because he was meeting with ETs. Right after the plane landed, the radar officers gave instructions to shut off all radar equipment. So there wouldn't be any evidence of the ETs coming to the base, obviously. Minutes later, a ground patrol reported 2 unidentified flying objects approaching. The tower received another report, a third UFO spotted behind the first 2. The soldier on the ground described the UFO as having a round shape with no tail, wings, and no audible engine. Sounds similar to what the Tic Tac UFOs are described by Navy pilots in the 2004 incident and 2015 incidents of them filming on airjet radar these unidentified objects flying over the coast of wherever they were doing their staging exercises, military exercises on the carriers and with their airplane jets. So basically, they had reported seeing unidentified aerial phenomenon or unidentified flying objects in the shape of tic-tacs and elongated crafts. So Navy pilots witnessed this. It sounds similar to what's being discussed here, that having a round shape or a tic-tac elongated shape with no tail, no wings, and no audible engine. So there's no form of an exterior propulsion system. So the propulsion systems are internal. So basically, the U.S. government has admitted, and the Navy has admitted, that UFOs are real, but they have no idea what they are and who's responsible being behind them, flying in U.S. airspace in other countries. So that's what's coming up in the new UFO report that's supposed to be released on June 25th. So the Greada Treaty is like a preface of the cover-up that has been going on, 80-year, 100-year, 50-year cover-up by the U.S. government, that they know who's behind the UFOs. They've reversed engineered UFOs themselves, and that there's likely secret space programs, and Lockheed Martin, who has been creating something like the tic-tacs, that's been spying on the U.S. Navy and the Air Force, on their carrier ships, on their jets, also airplanes. So this kind of is the backstory of all of that. The UFO approached the president's plane sitting alone on the runway. The first two flying saucers stopped about 300 feet over Eisenhower's plane, and one descended on the far side of the airplane and to touch down to the ground about 200 feet in front of it. The other object hovered over buildings with a good vantage point of anything that might come towards the plane and the other ship. From the flying saucer on the ground opened up a hatch and a small ramp touched down. The figure of President Eisenhower descended the staircase and walked in the direction of the round-shaped disc on the ground. He paused for a short moment right at the ramp. It appeared that he was shaking hands with another individual, but the distance would not allow a description. The president disappeared inside the ship. For about 45 minutes, you can imagine how confused and tense the officials, Secret Service, and base personnel felt. Former U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower emerged from the spacecraft with his recognizable erect military walk towards Air Force One, and that's the plane that he arrived on. The 1954 Greada Treaty. According to witnesses and researchers, they discussed the Greada Treaty and signed by the U.S. President, and apparently at first with the alien race known as the Greys. Later, other races got together on the Greada Treaty, the Tall Whites, Reptilians, and the Anunnaki. And this is what forms the cover-up, the UFO alien embargo. The 50-year cover-up, the 80-year cover-up, and the 100-year cover-up. Because none of these, the Greys, the Reptilians, the Anunnaki, they don't want anyone knowing about these treaties and what was signed with the U.S. government to give them anti-gravity craft in exchange for experimentation on humans and access to our whole genome. The 1954 Greada Treaty states, the aliens would not interfere in our affairs and we would not interfere in theirs. The U.S. government would keep their presence on Earth secret because they don't want any of this out. The aliens would furnish the U.S. with advanced technology like anti-gravity technology, regenerative medicine, etc., etc. The aliens could abduct humans and livestock on a limited basis for medical examination and monitoring. Well, it wasn't a limited basis. It was a lot of people abducted. And they couldn't remember anything of their abductions because there's mind-wiping technology that removes their memories of these experiences. And some of those experiences were quite traumatic. It wasn't harmless, it was traumatic. But this mind-wiping technology really does erase most of the memories, so people just have little bits of recall of what happened and bleed through memories, or residual memory imprints of what happened to them. The people subjected to the experiments and experiences would not be harmed and return to their point of abduction with no recollection of the event. Well, I guess to the viewpoint of the Greys or the reptilians, they're not harming the people they're experimenting on, but it does feel harmful to the people being experimented on. And they do recollect some of what happens in these experiences and events. So for some people, mind wiping doesn't work completely and they have bleed through memories. And this is really about talking about this 100-year cover-up, is that yes, UFOs are real, aliens are real, there's also the secret space programs that are real and exist. These Tic Tacs, some of them are ours, reversed engineered crafts from crash sites, developed into our own technology secretly by Lockheed Martin, planetary corporations, Earth Defense Force, Mars Defense Force, and it goes on in the SSP factions. And they also have mind-wiping technology, and they take people off-world to work as personnel in their facilities, in the SSP facilities, on the moon, Mars, and elsewhere. Well, that happens. The US could also do a medical examination and genetic experiment or experience with the aliens. They should share the results. The aliens would be granted secret facilities for their accommodations and experiences, and the secret facilities would be the underground dumb spaces where there's human military personnel present in the dumb spaces to oversee their experimentation, or the ETs would build out their own bases deep underground or underwater in the trenches, like the Marianas Trench. So they build their bases either deep underground in cavern systems or underwater where humans don't have access to them. The Majority 12 MJ-12. President Dwight Eisenhower established a permanent committee to oversee and conduct all covert activities with the aliens by the Greada Treaty. This committee, created on secrecy by executive memorandum NSC 5410, is known as Majority 12, Majestic 12, or simply as MJ-12. MJ-12. In later years, this operation evolved into and became known as MAGI, the Majority Agency for Joint Intelligence. MAGI is responsible directly and only to the President of the United States, and researchers have tried to figure out if Majestic 12 is real or not. There has been a lot of research, and it's unclear how deep that goes, how true it is or not true. But the fact is that the CIA, the FBI, MI6, NSA, DOD, DARPA, I think they know about the various crash retrievals of UFOs, the ETs, and they also know about some of the reptilian and gray bases underground and the experimentation that happens. They know about that. They've been sworn in on it. And if they need to get involved, they can get involved in crash retrievals. Area 51. Dulce base, underground facilities, it's all there. 1954 Greada Treaty's whistleblowers. These unusual events came to the public through a few witnesses and researchers. Some of them supposedly paid the ultimate price with their lives. For example, Gerald Blight, the psychic. Gerald Blight sent a letter to the head of a Southern California metaphysical organization on April 16, 1954, claiming to see the president and aliens with spaceships. Copies from this encounter on Edwards AFB base reached various news sources. Light's alleged to be a psychic with out-of-body abilities, and that was the way he had his experience on Edwards AFB. Phil Schneider, alien killer. In the early 90s, Phil Schneider presented in lectures giving talks on forms of alien life. Phil Schneider was allegedly one of 3 people who survived at the infamous 1979 Dulce firefight. The conflict involved large Greys, U.S. intelligence, and military at the Dulce underground base. And while talking about the Dulce base, there's also the Dulce papers that describe in detail experimentations that the Greys, the reptilians, and human scientists were involved in at the Dulce underground facility, making human ET hybrids and chimeras and other types of genetic experimentation. Phil Schneider was found dead in his apartment in January 1996 with a piano wire wrapped around his neck. Phil Schneider suffered torture, and all his presentation papers and research was not found in his apartment. Now recently, in the last couple of years, other whistleblowers who talked about the secret space program, reverse engineered crafts like William Whitecrow, was found to be hanged under mysterious circumstances. And recently, Mark McCandlish, in April of 2021, was found with a gunshot wound to his head in his house, mysteriously. And those people had spent half their lives disclosing what they knew about the SSPs, about UFOs, and other phenomena related to this field of study. Henry W. McElroy Jr., State Representative, a retired state representative to New Hampshire, Henry W. McElroy Jr. declared that Eisenhower not only was briefed but also met with aliens. While at the state legislature, McElroy confirms he saw a document with references to this meeting. John Titor II, the time traveler. Now, he seems to be fake in his testimony, and he seems to be able to copy a lot of research and claim it as his own. Just as a disclosure and preface, John Titor II, he's not trustworthy as a source of whistleblower evidence. Around September 2016, a man claiming to be the real John Titor, coming from the year 2036, published a book telling his story. In the book disclosed Chronicles of John Titor II, he says that the president watches a squadron flying over Washington, D.C. Jets were sent to intercept it, but the planes couldn't get it. This event was published in the Washington Post at the time, and in another opportunity, he was on board of a Navy ship, and he saw another demonstration with crafts emerging from the ocean nearby, flying for a little bit and flying back to the sea. And that's now called the unidentified aerial phenomenon instead of UFOs, unidentified flying objects. Coming from World War II, not only the U.S. Army, but other nations were decimated and couldn't fight back against such technology. For that matter, he decided to sign a treaty with the aliens. Now, John Titor II's testimony is very questionable, and he's done a lot of research, collated the research, and put it in as fact in his books, which is not his own experiences. The official story. From February 17th to the 24th of 1954, President Eisenhower was scheduled to make a winter vacation to Palm Springs. But on February 20th, rumors spread that the president was critically ill and dead, while he could not be found in the facility. The covered story told by White House Press Secretary James Haggerty was that the president had chipped a tooth and had been taken to a local dentist. In 1979, the dentist's widow did not recall any memory relating to her husband's alleged most famous client. When asked to describe details of her and her husband's attendance by official invitation at a steak fry the following evening, where her husband was introduced as the dentist who had treated the president. The Eisenhower Library has detailed records relating to the president's health. There has been no record of any dental intervention in February 1954 or the Greada Treaty. Presidents after Eisenhower remarks about aliens. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy, JFK, served as the 35th President of the United States from January 1961 until his assassination in November 1963. Bill Holden, who also served as Loadmaster for Air Force One, traveled with John F. Kennedy to Europe in the summer of 1963. "What do you think about UFOs, Mr. President?" And sober Kennedy replying, "I'd like to tell the public about the alien situation, but my hands are tied." Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford served as the 38th President of the United States from 1974 to 1977. On Face the Nation, March 26, 1966, he answered the question, "Ford, what about flying saucers? We've had some in Michigan in the past week. Do you believe in flying saucers? You've called for a congressional investigation." Dave, we've had several incidents in Michigan in the last week, incidents that many reliable good citizens felt were sufficient to justify some action by our government, and not the kind of flippant answer given by the Air Force where it passed it off as some swamp gas. Carter. Jimmy Carter served as the 39th President of the United States from 1977 to 1981. Carter said during his 1976 election campaign, after witnessing himself a UFO, "One thing's for sure, I'll never make fun of people who say they've seen unidentified objects in the sky. If I become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and the scientists." Despite his earlier pledge, once elected, Carter distanced himself from disclosure, citing defense implications as being behind his decision. Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan served as the 40th President of the United States from 1981 to 1989. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. From Reagan's 1988 speech with USSR's President Mikhail Gorbachev, President Reagan made similar remarks on many other occasions. George Bush. George H.W. Bush served as the 41st President of the United States from 1989 to 1993. As the 43rd Vice President of the United States, so he was the 43rd Vice President of the United States from 1981 to 1989, and CIA's Director on 1976 until 1977. Adam Gulch, a member of the Mutual UFO Network MUFON in 2016, asked George Bush Sr. when the U.S. government would tell Americans the truth about UFOs. And what did H.W. George Bush say? He said the following: Americans can't handle the truth. Some researchers point to George H.W. Bush as one of the members of MJ-12. So this is one of the most interesting articles that discusses the Greada Treaty. There's not much else known about the Greada Treaty. This article seems to have the most information, and it was published on January 2nd, 2017. So I just wanted to share this information and preface it in regards to what's happening with the UFO report that's to come out soon, and how the Greada Treaty relates to this, what came before and what's happening now. Thank you so much.